Hey everybody, welcome back to Football Talk with Vinny. In today's video, we're going to recap week 3. So just very quickly before I get into it, as you can see, I have a new setup, actually moved. So that's why the video is probably going to come out a little later. I'm going to try to get it out before Thursday's game, so at least we have that out just before the week starts. But even though I was kind of busy with moving, I still have to make time to record some of these videos, so that's what I'm doing now. With week 3 officially over with the Dallas Cowboys beating the Philadelphia Eagles pretty badly, it's time to really go over the entire week 3 games. Now with week 3 being over, it's kind of interesting as you can kind of start to see some of these teams that maybe won in week 1 are having, 2-game losing streaks, or some teams, you can start to see like, are they a good team or are they not? Again, it's still early and you'll know more about some of these teams as you play 4, 5, 6 games, but that's why you want to never really judge a team based on one particular game. So with that, we'll obviously start with the Thursday night game. Obviously, that was the Carolina Panthers and the Houston Texans. The Texans were starting the rookie third-round pick quarterback, and the Panthers won 24-9. So obviously, from the game, it makes the Panthers now 3-0. Again, they were one of my surprise picks to come out of the NFC. And again, I know I say it all the time on this channel, but the reason was because I thought that Sam Darnold was a much better quarterback than he showed in New York. I think a lot of people don't understand the concept that you need a good team, even if you're a good quarterback, to be successful. Tom Brady's last year in New England, he was actually, everyone thought he was losing a step and he wasn't as good. But it's like, no, the weapons in New England were trash. He had no guys to throw to, tight ends or receivers for that matter. So he looked below average. All of a sudden he goes to Tampa and he's now a top 5 quarterback again. I don't think he all of a sudden got better from the last year in New England to first year in Tampa. It's just his roster as an offense got better. Now, obviously, with the Carolina Panthers, they did have Christian McCaffrey exit the game, and there's reports he's going to miss multiple weeks. Obviously, when it's just general like that, you don't know if it's going to be 2 weeks or is it going to be 6 weeks. Obviously, if it's like a 6-week injury, it's going to be tough for them to continue this win streak, but their defense has played exceptionally well, which gets me to another injury on the defensive side of the ball, which is Jaycee Horn actually got hurt as well. So I think he's done for the year, which is why a couple days after they made the big trade for CJ Henderson. He was like a top 15 pick, and they only gave up like a 3rd-round pick and their tight end Dan Arnold. I mean, if you're Carolina, that's a really good upgrade for the cornerback position, especially since he's going to miss the rest of the season. And the fact that, again, he was a former #1 overall pick just 2 seasons ago, he's still a young player who's still going to be on a rookie deal for several more seasons. So next year when Jaycee Horn does come back, their defense may be even better. For Houston, obviously with Tyrod Taylor out, it's going to hurt them a little bit. Again, they've actually played a lot better than I think most people have thought they were going to play through the first 3 weeks of the season. So very quickly, some of the numbers for the teams. Sam Darnold was 23 of 34 and 304 yards and had 2 rushing touchdowns. So pretty efficient from Sam Darnold. Again, in Carolina, he's not being asked to win you a ball game. He's just being asked to make the throws when they're there. And then obviously we'll go over Chuba Hubbard's stats because he was really the primary back once McCaffrey went down. He had 11 carries for 52 yards, so that's a 4.7 yards per carry average. And then obviously DJ Moore has been killing it for the 3 weeks. He had another great game with 8 receptions for 126 yards. For Houston, they made the quarterback Davis Mills. He kind of just checked it down a lot. He really had the one drive at the end of the first half where they actually had to throw it farther because you're trying to score before the end of the half, and they did. So his stats were 19 of 28, 168 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Running backs really couldn't get anything going. The best back had 6 carries for 21 yards. They totaled 42 yards rushing as a team. Next game we're going to get into is the Buffalo Bills at the Washington Football Team. That was a 43-21 game. That was 21-0. And then, Washington had really 2 huge plays to get back in it, with the 60-something yard screen pass to Antonio Gibson, and then the fumble the very next play on the kick return. Without those 2 plays, Buffalo may be coming off of back-to-back games where they win, 35-0 at Miami, and this could have been a 42-0 game if those 2 plays didn't happen. But even with the plays, again, you win by 22 points against a good Washington team. And, Josh Allen finally played his best game of the season, and really, again, if you're getting paid all that money, this is what happens, right? If you play an average game, it's actually not good enough anymore. You have to be a star performer every week, or else you're going to hear criticism. For Josh Allen to do this against the Washington defense, that is very good. Obviously, it says a lot about the offensive line. They were able to really block Washington most of the night. And then again, the benefit of having a guy like Josh Allen is whenever they do get there, he can scramble out of the pocket and make some throws. And that kind of just demotivates the defense, right? When you finally get there as a D lineman, when the quarterback can run and take off and throw the ball downfield for a big play, kind of is like, damn, we finally got there. And then this idiot escapes and he throws a big pass. So Josh Allen's stats was 32 of 43, 358 yards, 4 TDs through the air with another rushing touchdown as well. So he had 5 total TDs. They did run the ball effectively as well. They had 13 carries for 60 yards with Zach Moss, 11 carries for 26 yards for David Singletary. So the fact that even against that Washington front, they were able to run the ball effectively, is only going to help the Buffalo Bills going forward. And realistically, I think if you're looking at all the AFC teams through 3 weeks, Buffalo's really looked the most impressive. If you just take out that second half in Pittsburgh in week 1, they have dominated every other quarter. And it's not even really close. They've just crushed everybody. And even the first half in Pittsburgh, it was 10-0, and it could have been 17-0 had, it could have been 17-0 had Josh Allen hit that one deep pass. I think it was in the middle of the second quarter in the Pittsburgh game. For Washington, this is kind of why I said I didn't think that they were going to win the division. I think a lot of people forget they were a 7-win team last year. So because they were only a 7-win team, they did win the division. So I think they got a lot more hype than they should have gotten. Again, had, let's just say, the Giants, Dallas, obviously, I think if Dak was healthy, would have won the division. But had the Giants won the division last year, people would be talking about the football team, but not to the extent that they did. It's like, yes, we know they have a good defense, but their secondary is pretty average. It's really just a great front line they have. And then their offense is pretty average too, right? You have a couple of good guys like Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson, but you're kind of weak at the quarterback spot, and the rest of the weapons on the offense is not great. Next, we'll go over the Browns and the Bears, with that being a final of 26-6. Obviously, wasn't really close. It was kind of close in the first half. Third and fourth quarter, Cleveland scored a couple times and really put the game away. Cleveland as a defense got, I believe it was 8 sacks on Justin Fields. There was a meme saying that Chicago passed for 1 yard. Justin Fields had 68 yards passing, but his sack yardage totaled 67, so that's why it was a net of 1 passing yard. And again, those of you that maybe watch ESPN and maybe Dan Orlovsky, he had a rant about how Matt Nagy should be fired because the way they ran offense is not helping the young quarterback. And I totally agree with what he said. And obviously he knows way more football than I do. So again, some of the stuff that he said about having 5-man protections for most of the snaps, again, that's not going to help a young quarterback. You want to have more guys in there to block, so it gives the quarterback more time to go through his progressions. Again, he is a young quarterback, so he's going to need that. But at the same time, this is what I was telling everyone when I said, hey, if Justin Fields is not the starter over Andy Dalton, and no disrespect to Andy Dalton, but there's a reason why, right? It has to be because in practice, they are seeing that Justin Fields is just maybe a little slow to pick up the offense, maybe not able to call the plays correctly, or just not getting the throws done in practice to where the coaches feel comfortable putting him in a game. Which is why, again, last week when Dalton went out, the coach was very confidently saying, when Andy Dalton comes back, he will be our starter, and this is why. When you look at the game, he was 6 for 20, 68 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, and again, obviously took 9 sacks. Excuse me, I just looked at it. It was 9 sacks, not 8. In 2021, to pass for 68 yards, that has got to be one of the worst passing performances in the last decade. Right? This is no longer the 1970s and the 80s where teams ran the ball most of the time and you really only passed it on play action. This is a passing league now. So to pass for 68 yards is pretty pedestrian. For Cleveland's side, again, they look like they're just kind of like in cruise control essentially, right? They're just a very good team. They have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, right? On the offensive side, they're able to just run the ball down after down after down, and then it puts pressure on the defense to have to stack the box. And then now with Odell back, again, eventually Jarvis Landry will come back. They're going to have weapons that can get it done on the outside. And then from the defense's perspective, again, you have 2 good pass rushers in Clowney and Myles Garrett. And again, that back end has got some good young talented players as well. Cleveland has really played well enough to be 3-0, which is really crazy just knowing where Kansas City's at. If Cleveland would have won that game, Kansas City would be sitting at 0-3. So I think Cleveland, probably you would rank them as the second best team right now in the AFC. At least they're playing as the second best team. Next, we'll go over the Ravens and Lions, and this was obviously a crazy ending. But in terms of just the whole game and the way it played out, obviously the Ravens took a 10-point lead. Give the Detroit Lions a lot of credit. They were able to kind of fight back, from being down 10 to a good football team. Most teams like Detroit in their situation, they kind of just lay down and the game kind of gets away from them. So give them credit. They were able to not only come back, but actually take the lead. And then unfortunately, you're finding ways to lose. A lot of bad teams do that sometimes. Right, you give up a 4th and 19, and then obviously Justin Tucker makes a ridiculously long 66-yard field goal, which I think is now the record for longest field goal ever made. And, really give Detroit's defense a lot of credit, right? They held Lamar Jackson to 16 for 31 passing, 287 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, which is kind of like, I would say, kind of a normal game from Lamar from the passing standpoint. But they did hold the Ravens to 22 carries for 116 yards. Now, I know 116 seems like a lot, but when you're the Baltimore Ravens and you're averaging 180 to 200 yards a game and you only get held to 116, if you're Detroit, at least you kind of held them a little bit. You held Baltimore to 19 points, so under 20. Usually when you hold teams to under 20 points, you give yourself a chance to win a ball game. For Detroit, instead of going over statistics, just the team in general, I think they're playing a lot better than most people thought. I know myself, along with many others, thought that Detroit and Houston would be battling really for that #1 overall pick. But really this early in the season, it really doesn't look that way. It looks like Detroit's going to play good enough, and eventually they're going to play some bad teams that they may get 2 or 3 or 4 victories this season. And the same for Houston, right? It looks like Houston's probably going to win 2 or 3 games. If you're Houston, you want Tyrod Taylor to come back. He's played much better than Davis Mills. But again, it looks like teams like Jacksonville and the Jets, they may be battling for the #1 pick again in consecutive years. Next, with the Colts and Titans, obviously the Titans taking it 25-16. And for this game, this was a huge game really for the Colts, right? At 0-2, going up against Tennessee, which is 1-1. With the loss, not only is Tennessee up 2 games, but now they have the tiebreaker. So at this point, they are so far ahead of Indy that even if Indy were to win a couple of games, I think if you're the Colts now at 0-3, you're really just looking at hoping to sneak into a wild card and maybe get yourself on a win streak. And then with the game, it was really close the entire game. And then obviously give Tennessee's offense credit with A.J. Brown going down. They were not only able to put up 25 points, but at the end of the game in the 4th quarter, the Colts had kicked a field goal to make it 16-22 with 10 minutes and 20 seconds left in the ball game. Just want to make sure I have that right. It was 10 minutes and 20 seconds in the ball game, and Tennessee's offense went on a 14-play, 67-yard drive that took up 7 minutes and 22 seconds. That effectively ends the ball game with that made field goal, right? You take all the time off the clock, you kick a field goal, you're now up 10. You're now up 9, so you're up 2 possessions, and now instead of 10 minutes and 22 seconds, you leave 2 minutes and 58 seconds. So now you essentially give them they need a miracle at this point. They need a touchdown, an onside, and then another score. With Tannehill, he did have 2 picks today. He did have 2 picks in the game, but other than that, he played particularly well. His quarterback rating was 81.8. And then again, for his yardage and completions, he was 18 for 27, 197 yards. So he was just efficient, threw 3 touchdowns and 18 completions. Derrick Henry was his normal self, 28 carries, 113 yards. Obviously, with A.J. Brown getting hurt, you definitely want to monitor that to see how long he's going to miss, if he's actually going to miss another game. Again, for the Tennessee Titans, I know it was the pick that I had for getting out of the AFC. I still kind of believe that they can come out of the AFC. I think their defense has played pretty bad all 3 weeks. Obviously, I think it's gotten better each week against, obviously, the Cardinals. They looked horrible in week 2. They looked better, but not great. You still gave up a lot of points, but you did play Seattle in Seattle, so you kind of understand that. This week here, you did only give up 16 to a Colts team that is a pretty efficient offense, right? You got a good O-line, you got a running game. So Tennessee's defense has gotten a little better, and again, we don't need Tennessee as a defense to play great. You just need them to play good. I think their offense is going to eventually get on track. Again, they've had some good games the last 2, and they're really not even all on the same page, with A.J. Brown missing some time. And obviously with Julio Jones those first couple weeks, he had to get in rhythm with Ryan Tannehill. Next, we'll go to the Chargers and Chiefs, and obviously with that one being a final of 30-24, this was a wild game. Again, Kansas City's defense looks like it's really just can't stop anybody. Whether the team is great at running the ball or passing the ball, teams can do whatever they want to do on that Kansas City defense. right? Those first 2 weeks, you played one of the top 2 rushing offenses in the league in Baltimore and Cleveland, and they were able to run all over you. And then in week 3, you get the Chargers, who are a more pass-heavy offense, and they just pass the ball all over you. So obviously that's really concerning if you're Kansas City. Again, still, the way Kansas City instills fear in an opposing team is different than any other team. I mean, at this point, if you're talking late in the ball game with the San Diego Chargers, it was a 4th and 4. They got a false start to make it 4th and 9. Instead of kicking the game, instead of kicking a field goal to go up 3, they still went for it on 4th and 9. They obviously got the first down, and then they were able to get in the end zone and only leave like 33 seconds for Patrick Mahomes. But literally, against any other opponent, I don't think you do that, right? Even if they have a bad defense, you still just kick the field goal. It's 4th and 9, right? Like, it doesn't take a great defense to stop someone on 4th and 9. So again, I think that Kansas City's offense just puts fear like no other offense does in the league. We're going to talk about it from the Chargers perspective, though. Obviously, Justin Herbert had a fantastic game. Again, I think a lot of people think he's already a fringe top 10 quarterback, if not top 5. And again, he's starting to play like it now, obviously against the Dallas Cowboys, which is surprising, but he actually didn't have a good game there. Now, from Kansas City's perspective, I was actually talking to my nephew about the Chiefs, and he's funny. He's like most fans, right? He's like, man, the Chiefs are going to lose 5 or 6 more games, and then you start listing the teams that are 3-0, right? Or teams like Buffalo. You're like, oh, you're going to lose to Buffalo, you're going to lose to Denver, you're going to lose to Oakland. It's like, dude, they're 2 4th down conversions away from being 3-0, right? So I think a lot of people, they overreact to any win or any particular loss, not understanding that not only did you lose to 2 good football teams, in Baltimore and Los Angeles, but you barely lost, right? And again, I think the losses could actually be good for Kansas City because they're coming off of back-to-back Super Bowl appearances, 3 straight trips to the AFC Championship game, right? It's easy to get a little lackadaisical and just say, okay, well, we're just this good and we're going to just trot out here and we're going to win 12, 13 ball games and we're just going to win when we get in the playoffs and, we'll see you at the Super Bowl. It's very difficult to win any ball game in the NFL. So I think this is going to make not only that offense, but that defense kind of refocus, especially Patrick Mahomes. He's going to probably say to himself over these next couple of days, like, hey, I can't make these mistakes that are costing us ball games. Our defense obviously is struggling right now. They're not able to get as many stops. So us as an offense, we're going to have to put up 40 points to win, which is really what Peyton did, really during his prime in Indy, right? He had to put up 35, 40 points to win a ball game because the defense was going to give up 30 points. So I think at this point, Kansas City is in a similar situation where they have to understand and realize that their offense has to carry the entire roster. But you don't want to overreact. Again, they got Philly this week. If you beat Philly, you get to 2-2, and then you have an actual big test. Then the week after, you have a big test when Buffalo comes into Arrowhead. And again, if Kansas City were to beat Philly and then beat Buffalo that week, nobody would be saying anything. Everything would be over. Everyone would be like, okay, Kansas City just had 2 bad games. Now, obviously, Buffalo is playing very well. So what you've done with losing those 2 games is if you beat Philly, but Buffalo does come in and beat you, again, that is a very good team. You're now 2-3, 5 weeks into the season, and then you're going to have to start reeling off some victories. So by losing these couple games early, what really does is it puts pressure on them to have to go on a win streak, because if they don't, they're not going to get the 1 seed. I still don't see a scenario other than Patrick Mahomes getting hurt in which they don't make the playoffs. So again, I don't think the losses early really are necessarily going to hurt them. I don't really feel like they can't go on the road in the playoffs and win, so I don't think that will affect them as much as well. Next, we'll go over the Saints and Patriots game, with the Saints winning 28-13. Obviously, the defense for New Orleans were definitely the best unit on the field. They really just shut out the New England Patriots, obviously with them getting a touchdown, but that was late in the ball game. And the New Orleans offense, it looks like it's going to be like this all year, where they're kind of like reliant on the run game, and then Jameis does just enough to win a ball game. Jameis Winston was 13 for 21, 128 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then the shocking part is when you look at Jameis' stats, he has 387 passing yards, like for the entire season, the 3 games, and he was not hurt in any of the games. So he's played 3 full games, and he has 387 yards. So he's averaging like 130-ish yards a game passing. That's pretty bad in today's NFL. But again, when your defense is dominant and you've got a good running back in Kamara, you can win ball games like that. But what I was saying is, if you get into a game where your defense gives up some points and now your offense has to score the ball, I don't know how Jameis is going to play in those games. Obviously, against Carolina, you saw it play out where Jameis had a very bad game because they were behind. So I think when they play some good teams and they get behind early, that may be, that may be their kind of one kryptonite where they're a good team when they're ahead, but when they're behind, they may lose a lot of those games. For Mac Jones, clearly his worst game of the season. Obviously threw it a ton. He was 30 of 51, 270 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 picks. Again, you're going up against a very good defense. Again, if you're the New England Patriots, though, I still think they have a shot to make the playoffs, even though they're 1-2. Again, you've played some tough opponents. Obviously, you had the one loss to Miami and now this loss to New Orleans. I think if you're New England, obviously you have a very tough week coming up this week with obviously Tom Brady coming back into New England. You're probably going to lose that game. I really just don't see how Tom Brady coming off a loss is going to lose back-to-back games, especially this game he's going to want to win. Again, you have a rookie quarterback, so you're going to have more ups and downs in a season than you would if you had a veteran quarterback. But I think Bill Belichick understands that. Again, Stephon Gilmore still hasn't played. He should come back week 7 or 8. So I think if they could stay around that 500 mark, I know if they lose this week, they'll be 1-3. But if they can win a game or two in these next 2-3 weeks and get to close to 500, by the time Stephon Gilmore comes back, obviously with each game Mac Jones plays, he'll be more comfortable. As long as you're around 500, I think you should be in the hunt for a wild card spot come late December. Again, obviously if you're New England, it's not looking good. You have to win games like week 1 in Miami, right, where you were only down 1 and you got that fumble in the goal line. So if you're New England, you don't have a large margin for error because of the quarterback situation. So you have to win a lot of these close ball games in order to make the playoffs. Next, we'll do the Falcons and Giants, that game being a final of 17-14. I was actually really surprised at how terrible the Giants offense played. I would have thought going up against Atlanta, their defense hadn't stopped anybody all season, that Danny Dimes and Saquon Barkley were going to be able to get on a run and score some points. Obviously that did not happen, and eventually if you keep the game close, Matt Ryan is going to win you the ball game. If you look at the numbers for the New York Giants, Daniel Jones was 24 of 35, 266, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Saquon starting to play more plays, right? Starting to get more handoffs. He had 16 carries for 51 yards and a score, so by far his best game. He also added 6 catches for 43 yards, so it was just under that 100-yard marker at like 96, 94 yards. Obviously in this game, Sterling Shepard went down and Slayton went down, so if you're the Giants, hopefully you get those guys back sooner rather than later. But again, when you have some injuries there, you're going to have to overcome them. Again, they have Kadarius Toney, who hasn't really played much because of the wide receiver depth that they have. So now he's going to obviously be more involved, I would imagine, in the next coming weeks. But I think even though it's only 3 weeks in the season, this is why I said that I didn't really like the Giants' decision in the draft to trade back and take a wide receiver. Because once you sign Kenny Golladay, you have Kenny Golladay, you have Sterling Shepard, you have Darius Slayton, you have Evan Ingram, the tight end. You have enough weapons. I would have thought at 11, you don't trade back, you don't trade back and you take Rashawn Slater, who the Chargers got, who has played lights out for them. And if he was on the Giants roster, you now would have an improved offensive line, which I think would help not only the running game, but the passing game. Instead, they got a guy in Kadarius Toney, who's there's memes about that says through 2-3 games, he has -2 receiving yards. So he's done actually worse than nothing. For Atlanta, obviously a big win at 0. You never want to go to 0-3. Your odds of making the playoffs at 0-3 is drastically different than at 1-2. So with the win, it does give them the chance to maybe win their next game, get back to 500, and give themselves a shot at making the playoffs. Steelers and Bengals next, with the Bengals winning 24-10. For this game, obviously it didn't look good for Pittsburgh. I think at this point, if you're Pittsburgh, you've only played one good half, and that was the second half at Buffalo. The rest of the season, really, you've really played bad. The offense has looked anemic, looks like he can't really even move the ball. Big Ben, unfortunately, looks like age is catching up to him. It seems like Tom Brady is the only guy in the history that could escape aging. While I don't think the defense was bad, I think when your offense is just as anemic as Pittsburgh is and you keep not being able to move the ball, eventually your defense is going to give up some big plays. So that's just how it works. Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati offense, they have plenty of weapons there with Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, right? Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins. So there's a lot of weapons there in Cincinnati. So eventually, if you give them too many possessions, they are going to put up some touchdowns. I think if you're Pittsburgh, unfortunately, you really don't have an option. I guess you could go to Dwayne Haskins. I don't know if he's ready to play. But at this point, you kind of have to try to really just stick with Big Ben the rest of the season and just hope he can play a little better than he's played over these first 3 weeks. But if he looks like anything he's looked like in the first 3 weeks, this is going to be a long season for Pittsburgh. This is going to be a year where, maybe they win 6 or 7 games, right? And they miss the playoffs, and then the whole goal of the offseason is to find the starting quarterback for the next season. Obviously for Cincinnati, big win gives you a chance. Anytime you can stack some wins together early, right, and give yourself a chance to make the playoffs, especially as a young team with Cincinnati. Next, we'll go over the Cardinals-Jags. Obviously, this one was actually 31-19, even though both teams actually held like 10, 12-point leads at one point. So obviously with that first half, it was very close, very defensive ball game, and then they had that 109-yard kick six, they call it. It was a field goal. They kicked a 68-yard field goal. It was missed from the Arizona Cardinals. The Jags were able to, kind of receive the kick, and they actually ran it back 109 yards. At one point they were up 19-10, so you had a 9-point lead in that third quarter. And then obviously Arizona responded with the touchdown, and then unfortunately Trevor gave it away through a pick six, and that kind of just changed the momentum of the ball game. And then Arizona really never looked back after that. I think from Jacksonville's standpoint, they look like they're going to be a very bad team, going to struggle all year long. Again, I think although Trevor Lawrence has thrown a lot of interceptions, I don't think it's that much of a big deal. I don't think it means he's not ready to play. It's more just a factor of their team is not good, right? And he's being forced to have to just make throws and stay in the ball game and just figure it out, right? Peyton Manning had to do that in 1998, right? He led the league in interceptions. I think he still actually has the rookie record for most interceptions in a season. I want to say it's at 28. Peyton threw 28 picks his rookie season. So just because you throw a lot of interceptions, especially in your rookie year, does not mean you're not going to be a good quarterback. So I think anyone who's like dogging Trevor, saying, oh, he's not a good quarterback, he's not going to make it in the NFL, it's like, dude, relax. Like, he's on a bad football team. He's having to throw a lot because they're playing from behind every single game. He's had some nice moments. He's made some good throws at some points. So again, he's just got to cut down the turnovers, but that's every young quarterback. Right? All quarterbacks turn the ball over, and especially young quarterbacks. It's easier to trick them because, again, they're not used to the speed of the game. They're not used to just the fact that everybody on the field is a professional at this point, right? When you play in college, you usually are playing a defense that maybe has 1 or 2 guys that you know are going to make the next level. So those guys you just stay away from and you attack other places. In the NFL, you can't do that. Everyone's a professional. For Arizona, it's a 3-0 start, but we'll see how that holds up. Again, you've gotten some wins on some very close ball games where maybe you could have lost. Obviously, at the Minnesota game, you could have lost on the game-ending field goal. And even with this game, the fact that Jacksonville was up 9 at one point, right, if you're Arizona, has to scare you a little bit because when you play some better teams and you're down 9, you may not come back like you did. But again, if you're Arizona, at this point, you haven't made the playoffs in so long, all you really care about is making the playoffs. So again, when you start 3-0, you give yourself statistically such a good opportunity to make the playoffs, right? Even if you were to go like 500 over the rest of the games, right? There's 13 games. So if you win 6 or 7 more games out of the 13, you're a 9-10 win team, and that probably can get you into the playoffs. Very quickly, go over the Jets-Broncos. It was 26-0, so there's not much to go over. Denver routed them. Another tough game for Zach Wilson. 19 for 35, 160 yards passing, no touchdowns, 2 picks. Again, I think Zach Wilson is experiencing a lot what Sam Darnold experienced his couple seasons in New York, which is bad football team, bad roster construction. In every game you play with New York, it seems, you're getting blown out and you're having to throw the ball. So when you have to throw the ball, you don't have a lot of good players on the offense. You have some decent players, but nobody special. Again, it makes it tough, right, for any quarterback, let alone a rookie. When you watch the games, you could see that Zach Wilson has talent. He could throw the football. But again, if they do not surround him with better talent, he is going to struggle, just like Sam Darnold did. And if you are a delusional Jets fan, you're going to say the same shit you said about Sam Darnold, right? You're already being proven wrong as the weeks go by that Sam Darnold is a capable quarterback. Your organization did a terrible job of surrounding him with talent. And unfortunately, a lot of fans just believe that the quarterback has to outperform even though the weapons are terrible, that's not how this works. Again, Zach Wilson will struggle if the Jets do not surround him with more talent. Now, again, they have a lot of draft picks. They have a lot of money to spend. So over the next couple seasons, hopefully they'll surround him with talent. But I think for this particular season, it's going to be a long year. And I think that the Jets and Jags may battle it out for who gets the #1 overall pick. From Denver's perspective, not really that impressive. I mean, they got another win, but at this point, their wins are against an 0-3 Giants team, an 0-3 Jets team, and an 0-3 Jags team. So you probably have beaten, arguably, the 3 worst teams in the NFL. So again, although I always say not to overreact to one game, I think in Denver's case, it's important to not overreact to 3 games because of the opponents you played, right? You played probably 3 of the worst teams in the league. So when you start playing good teams, I think that'll be more of a judgment of how good is this Denver Broncos team. And I think we're going to see it this week, right? This week they go up against the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously that is a very good team. So we'll see how this game plays out. If they're able to win this ball game or even keep it close, I think even if they lose to Baltimore, if they keep it close, you would give them more respect as a football team and say they're a better team than you thought, even if they lose to Baltimore, than the 3 previous wins that they've gotten against really the worst teams in the league. You know, and really, if you look at Denver's schedule, not only do they play Baltimore, but the next couple of weeks, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Cleveland Browns, the Washington Football Team, and the Dallas Cowboys. So the next 5-6 weeks, you are going to play some playoff caliber teams. So I think over this next 4 or 5 week stretch, let's see what their record is over the next 4 or 5 games to really accurately judge how good of a start this actually is, or how much is it to do with just the fact you played bad teams. Next, we'll talk about the Las Vegas Raiders and the Miami Dolphins. With this one, Miami got off to a hot start, was up 14-0. Give the Raiders a lot of credit. I believe they scored 25 straight points to take a lead, 25-14. And then Miami was able to, again, give them credit to come back and tie the ball game up. Both teams drove down for field goals. And then obviously with Oakland at the very end of the game, was able to get in very close field goal range and kick the game winner. So obviously a very important game for both teams. If you're Miami with the loss now, you drop to 1-2, with your only win being a 1-point win against the New England Patriots. So at this point, you're going to have to search to try to get a win next week. You don't want to drop to 1-3 because your playoff chances don't look good at 1-3. For Oakland, again, starting 3-0, really doesn't matter how you get there. Like we talked about with Arizona, when you're 3-0, at this point, if you were to be 500 the rest of the season, you're going to win 9 or 10 games. You know, Derek Carr's been on fire. He leads the league in passing yards. And again, you're going to get Josh Jacobs back, so you're going to have a better running game when he comes back. I think Oakland's wins are probably more impressive than any of the other 2 3-0 teams that we've previously talked about. I mean, one was at home, but it's still against the Baltimore Ravens, so a very good football team. Obviously, with each week, Pittsburgh looks bad. That win looks less and less impressive. But again, you still went into Pittsburgh and got a win. And then you were able to fight and claw your way out of a 14-0 deficit. And you were able to win the ball game against a decent team in the Miami Dolphins. Now we'll get to the game that probably everybody wants to hear about. Obviously, this is the best outcome for me with the Rams and the Tampa Bay Bucks, with the Rams winning the game 34-24. Now with this one, obviously in the first quarter, it was a very close ball game. Even at the end of half, it was only a 7-point ball game at 14-7. But I think once Stafford started to settle down, right, because again, he hasn't played in many big games being in Detroit. He's played in some, he's made the playoffs a couple times, but this was probably the biggest game he's played in, even though playoff games are bigger. But when you have a team as talented as the Rams and they're expected to be the best team or one of the best teams in the NFC, and you make a win like this against arguably the best team in the NFC, and not only is it a win, it's a convincing win. I think this is why I said in that preseason prediction video, I think the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl, right? Obviously, I'm a Cowboys fan. I hope Dallas, the way their defense is playing, I hope they can win. But if Dallas doesn't win, you know, again, as a fan, I think that the Rams have the best built team in the league. You have a defense that's a top 5 defense, and I told everyone, with Stafford, they're going to have a top 10 offense for sure. Stafford looks like an MVP candidate in that offense. Again, they have weapons, they have a defense. Matthew Stafford doesn't have to actually play that well to win. Again, even if Stafford didn't throw for 4 touchdowns today, we know Stafford played tremendous, but even if you give Stafford only 300 passing yards and only 3 touchdowns, and say 1 or 2 of those drives he didn't get a score, they still would have won the ball game because they won by, yes, they won by 10, but they were up 17 with like 2 minutes to go in the ball game. So you kind of let Tampa just drive down the field and get a score because you knew you just wanted the clock to run out. I think obviously with the Rams, it's going to be health, because you have so many star players that you do not want an injury. Because if a guy like Aaron Donald or Jalen Ramsey goes out, you have 0 chance to replace them. There is no next man up shit when you have as good of players as those guys. Now, obviously, they could lose probably other players on their defense, but if they lose either of those two, the season's going to take a drastic turn. Again, obviously, for the offensive side of the ball, it's really just Stafford. I think the pieces that they have on offense, none of them are anything special. I know Cooper Kupp's playing very well, but he's playing well because the offense has enough weapons to where you can't put your best corner on Cooper Kupp, because you probably have to put him on Robert Woods. And then you also need a safety over top to guard Deshaun Jackson. And then you also have to stop the running game. So they have so many weapons that Cooper Kupp so far in the early season is just benefiting from the coverage he's getting. But again, this is also why I said the Rams were the favorites in my mind, and I picked them to win, is because their offense has everything you want, right? Their defense, again, is a top 5 defense, and come playoff time, they can win any way you want to win. You want to win a game 13-10, they can do that. You want to win a shootout where Stafford has to throw for 4 touchdowns because he's playing a bad Bucs defense and they put up 40, he can do that as well. For Tampa, it's not even really that bad of a loss. I know they've got, kind of blown out. But again, in my mind, they got blown out on the road against the best team in the league, in my opinion. And I think that's not anything to feel as if that's going to derail your season. The Bucs could easily win the next 4 or 5 games, sitting at 6-1, 7-1, maybe 7-2, right? And still be right up there. Quickly, we'll go over the Minnesota Vikings and Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, a huge win for Minnesota, getting it 30-17 with an 0-2 start. You needed a win. Again, like we talked about with some of the other teams, don't want to drop to 0-3. You almost have no shot to make the playoffs at 0-3. For Seattle, this is a very tough loss, coming off of back-to-back losses in which you held a 10-point lead. That is devastating because now you drop to 1-2, and your chances of missing the playoffs dramatically increases at 1-2 as opposed to 2-1. Not to mention, you're probably in the toughest division. So at 1-2, your chances of winning the division is probably gone. And then again, you just have a tougher schedule than most of the league, because while Minnesota, yes, they have to play Green Bay twice, they're also going to get Detroit twice and Chicago twice, where Seattle doesn't get a break, right? You're getting the Niners twice, you're getting the Rams twice, you're getting the Cardinals twice. So you play much tougher games in your division than a team like Minnesota is going to play. Obviously, you have Russell Wilson, so you always have a chance in every game you play, but it's just Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, right? You don't have much else. The defense can't really stop good offenses, particularly, and the offense, you're essentially, with a bad offensive line, you're having to tell your offense to put up 35, 40 points to win a ball game. For Minnesota, they're a couple plays away from being 3-0, so I think their 1-2 start is more important. Again, if you're Minnesota, you definitely play well enough to beat the Arizona Cardinals. Your kicker just unfortunately missed a 36-yarder, or else you would be sitting at 2-1. Not to mention, you were up 10 in Cincinnati. Give the Bengals credit, in week 1, they were able to come back, but you had an overtime game in which you could have won that ball game as well. So you could be a couple plays here and there, and you could be sitting at 3-0. So I think the fact that Minnesota's 1-2, you still have a shot at the playoffs, especially in the NFC. If you can get maybe 2 wins when you play Detroit, obviously you're probably going to have to get 2 wins now when you play Chicago, right? You can get back on track. You could get back to 500, just above it, right? Which will give you a chance at the wild card. Let's go to the Sunday night game, last 2 games now, with the Green Bay Packers obviously winning 30-28. With that game, Green Bay was up 17-0. I remember watching and be like, wow, this game is going to be a blowout. It looks like Green Bay is going to win this 40-10 or something. But, again, give the Niners some credit. They were able to make a couple scores. That one kick return right after the 17-0 lead was huge to get that touchdown right before half to make it a ball game. And they were able to claw their way back, take a lead with 33 seconds to go, or 37 seconds. But again, as Green Bay has done to Dallas so many times, and other teams as well, 37 seconds, was too much time. And even with no timeouts, 2 perfect passes that really, like, Rodgers might be the only quarterback other than maybe Mahomes can make in the league. Like, he just consistently makes those throws where it's like, You got to be kidding. The guy's jumped up, the defender, outstretched arm, and it goes like 1 inch over his fingertips right to the receiver. It's just ridiculous what he can do. And this is what I was saying after week 1. Everyone just calm down. I know it was a blowout game, but in no way, shape, or form could I ever envision the fact where Rodgers comes back and he's trying to do this to get himself traded. There's just not possible. He knows he's got a good enough roster to win the Super Bowl. For the Niners, though, that's why I picked them to make the playoffs, because again, I think that as a football team, they just got a lot of injuries last year, but I think being healthy this year, they're going to be a scary out for anyone. Green Bay is definitely one of the top 5 teams in the NFC for sure. Probably one of the top 3. Probably goes Rams, Bucks, Packers. So the fact that the Niners were able to really take a lead after being down 17-0 to a very good football team shows you how talented of a roster this Niners team is. And then the last game, the Monday night game, my favorite game, obviously, to watch. The Dallas Cowboys absolutely slaughtered the Philadelphia Eagles. The best win of the season. As a Cowboys fan, I cannot tell you, if Dallas wins 2 games a year, I want it to be at Philly and home against Philly. If Dallas wins 2 games, those are the only ones I want to win. I just fucking hate the Eagles so much, you have no idea. I think all Cowboys fans understand that. The way the game played out, Dallas' offense just absolutely dominated. I think Philly really had the one good play when we got a pick and we got the ball at the 1, they were able to get a fumble off of Dak and recover it for a touchdown. Other than that one play, Dallas completely dominated the entire game, right? They were able to drive the ball at will. They had another unfortunate QB sneak with Dak Prescott that would have resulted in another touchdown, or else we would have put up 48 points on the Philadelphia Eagles. But again, even without that play, Dallas completely dominated the game from start to finish. I'm obviously really surprised through 3 weeks at the Dallas Cowboys defense. I know we got shredded against Tampa, but Tampa's just, they have so many weapons. You need an elite defense to stop them. But the fact that against the Chargers in week 2, we held them to 17 points, where the Chargers just went for 30 on Kansas City. And then this week, we play Philly, who their offenses looked pretty good. Obviously, week 2, it didn't look good, but you played an elite defense in San Francisco. And then this week, we were able to really just kind of shut them down. And obviously, we knew our offense was going to be super explosive. It's been like that the entire season. And if Dallas' defense can get some turnovers, which again, I think we're still leading the league in turnovers on the defensive side of the ball, and we could just get a couple stops here and there, our offense is so explosive, I think we have a very good shot of not only winning the division, but winning some playoff games. But again, that's so far away, so we'll see. At this point, though, I'm just impressed at the way Dallas' defense has played. And then my boy Zeke, he just seems like he loves playing the Philadelphia Eagles. He absolutely crushes their soul every time he plays them. I fucking love it. 17 carries, 95 yards, and 2 scores. He had a couple carries where he looked like the old Zeke, where he just put his head down and he just ran right over a linebacker, just drove him back 2 or 3 yards in that goal line. Pollard coming in, he had 11 carries for 60 yards, so Pollard played pretty well. And, you know, at first I was more along the lines of like, hey, Zeke is still the starting back. He's still the elite back. But the way Pollard's playing, I think it is a good 1-2 punch. You almost look at it like Cleveland at this point, where Cleveland has 2 very different backs. You have Nick Chubb, who is definitely the starting running back. He gets the bulk of the carries. Because Kareem Hunt gives you such a different option, where he is more of a receiving back and he's a little quicker, right? He gives you that change of pace that is actually important. And I think Tony Pollard gives us that with Ezekiel Elliott. So I think really, if I'm a Cowboys fan and also just the coaching staff going forward, I really think that it's maybe not going to be a split carry, but it could be something where Zeke gets 60-ish% of the carries and Pollard gets like 40% of the carries. It could be something like that, or maybe 2/3 to 1/3. I definitely don't think it'll be like last year where Pollard only gets in when Zeke needs a breather, or Zeke, you know, gets hurt, so Pollard has to come in. I do think there will be series where Pollard is just on the field. So that's it for the Week 3 recap. Thank you guys so much for staying and watching the whole video. If you did like it, make sure to like the video and also subscribe if you're not yet subscribed, as both of those do help the channel out a lot. And obviously, I look forward to watching the Week 4 games and updating you guys on those as well. Thank you guys so much. Bye.